I went to a wedding recently in Mexico, in a little seaport town in Oaxaca. The couple, two Americans from New York, had discovered the place a few years ago and promised the 60 of us who came a very Mexican experience with fireworks, and a side trip the following day up a winding dirt road past coffee plantations and orchids to a little mountain town called Nopala. About halfway there, we ran into mud left by the rainy season. But with a dozen people pushing, we got through easily and arrived an hour later. It was like the little Mexican town I'd lived in 40 years ago, and I was delighted to see how much the Mexico of the 50s was still left in the 90s, with pigs and chickens on the cobbled streets, open stalls, a marketplace, a church from what seemed like the dawn of time, and in front of many homes, a path of marigold petals. It was the eve of the Day of the Dead, when the spirits of departed loved ones are welcomed back with offerings of the food and drink and possessions they'd enjoyed in life. The bright, aromatic yellow flowers were there to help the spirits of the children who had died that year find their way home. Nearby in the cemetery, townspeople were mending the crosses in their family plots and setting candles for the visit the whole town would make later that night. I spoke for a few minutes with a man who was decorating 4 crosses, those of his mother and father, and of his 2 sons, aged 6 and 25. It wasn't unusual, I knew, to lose children here to poverty and accident. What was far more striking in this town where nearly everyone was remembered were the few graves with no one left to tend them, the mounds so overgrown with vegetation they were turning into little more than rises in the land. I asked him how far back his own family went. He didn't understand the question. "How many generations since you came here?" I tried again. He was too polite to show it, but I could sense his amazement at my lack of understanding. "We are from here," he said. On the way back, we hit the mud again. It was uphill now, and it took us a little longer to push through. Besides, 4 cars were stuck ahead of us, and it was getting dark.
So all the buses are out of the mud.
Around the corner, we hit another section of mud no one had noticed on the way down. It was even deeper than the first, and twice as hard to get through.
And now we've got another one, right? Just like it, worse?
I can't see that far ahead, it's too dark.
By now, it was pitch dark, and the road had narrowed.
There's more mud and even
worse, I heard.
Yeah.
Is that what she said?
Yeah.
Mommy, it's best for us to walk ahead.
No one was talking about it, but we all knew the stories about buses full of Mexicans toppling off the sides of mountains. Being American didn't feel like much protection when the buses were fishtailing on their way out of the mud and half of us were standing on either side like duck pins.
Very panicky.
With about 20 people pushing, the last of the buses finally got through. Now all we had to do was get to them.
Everybody, walking here, until here.
A flash from someone's camera let us see what was ahead. On one side, an ocean of mud, about 3 feet deep.
Oh, it's pretty bad there.
On the other, a sheer drop into the barranca. Between the two, a ledge about 8 inches wide. We held hands, climbed up on the ledge, and started walking single file through the dark. It was looking like a disaster. Instead, we had the time of our lives. We'd become the kind of community Americans usually turn into only when the lights go out and bail out of when the power is restored.
Okay, no problem. We all here?
Would anyone need a towel?
We laughed and joked all the way back, celebrating our newfound brotherhood and sisterhood of mud. Someone said Nopala was the perfect timeless Mexican village. Next year, she was going to come back in a rented car, if the roads were paved.
Oh, please don't answer that. What else can
We arrived 6 hours late, at an average speed someone computed of about 5.2 miles an hour, just a little faster than a burro. I walked along the beach before turning in. The small choker of condos twinkled along the neck of the bay, where 3 years ago there'd been only sand. The tide of development was coming fast to Mexico. My old hometown in the mountains, once about 50,000, was now 750,000, with smog and traffic jams, and so full of strangers, no one knew the way to the nearest church. In fact, to handle the increase in business expected from NAFTA, the government had already announced plans for a new superhighway through the mountains from here straight across the state to the city of Oaxaca. The lady on the bus would soon have half her wish. Before long, she'd be able to drive on a real road to Nopala. But by the time she got there, the real Nopala would probably be gone.